Hello all and welcome to TVM Academy. This is CAT VRC 100 series, a free practice course for CAT verbal preparation. So we are going to discuss RC number 5. The link to this RC as usual has been shared with you over a Telegram group. It has also been sent to your registered email IDs. If you have not signed up for this course yet, please do so on our portal. All the links have been shared in the description box of this video. Thank you. So let's begin discussing RC number 5. So in the first paragraph of this passage, author tells you that this man called Bernard Bailyn has proposed that migration was an important event in US history and therefore it should become an important principle for rewriting history of pre-industrial North America. Okay. He bases his argument, Bernard Bailyn bases his argument on 4 important propositions. The first proposition is that English migration to the United States was a natural spillover. The English were in a habit of moving around their countryside, and their reaching the United States was just a natural outgrowth of their tendencies. It was a natural outcome of their tendencies. The second proposition is that there was no universal distinctive feature of the New World. New World here refers to what we today call the United States. There was no universal distinctive feature of the New World. The culture across different states varied greatly. There was no common culture. The third proposition is that there were 2 groups of migrants, servants and land searchers. And he also goes on to say, Bernard Bailyn, Mr. BB, he also argues that it was recruiters, therefore, who defined the social character of migration and migrants in the North Americas. If they wanted unskilled laborers would migrate. And if they wanted skilled artisans, they would migrate. So it was the recruiters who defined the social character of migrants to the North Americas. Okay. Finally, the fourth proposition is that colonial culture was an incomplete replica of the true English culture. So they tried to copy in the New World, in New England. By the way, New England is not part of England. It is part of the Americas. So in colonial, in the New World, they tried to copy the culture of England, but it was merely a bad replica or an incomplete replica of the same. Now, please note, all these 4 propositions are Bernard Bailyn's point of view. In the 4th paragraph, finally, author gives us his own point of view. The writer of this passage gives us his point of view, and he partially rejects Bernard Bailyn's 4th proposition. And he argues that though Bernard Bailyn is right in suggesting that the new world, the new colonies, the new land was trying to replicate or copy the English culture, it was not a bad replica. In fact, New England, their culture was comparable to that in England. So this is author's argument. Finally, he says in the last paragraph that after the tenure of service got over, the indentured servants, indentured laborers, diverted their resources that they had earned in buying lands in the West. And it is in the West, therefore, that a new type of culture emerged, which could be called distinctively American in nature. Now, please note, therefore, in the end, author has refuted Bernard Bailyn's 2nd proposition that there was no common culture or distinctive feature of the New World. There was no distinctive culture in the so-called United States. Author says in the West, there did develop a defining culture, a distinctive pattern, cultural pattern, because of so and so reasons. Okay. With this bit of understanding, we can answer the questions. Question number 1. Which of the following statements about migrants to colonial North America is supported by information in the passage? Okay. So it's a fact-based question. Option A, a larger percentage of migrants to colonial North America came as indentured servants than as free agents interested in acquiring lands. Now, in the third paragraph, author does mention the two groups who came to North America as migrants. One group came as indentured servants, another came to acquire land. Okay. However, what percentage of migrants were indentured laborers and what percentage were people interested in buying lands? There has never been a comparison between the two. There is no conclusive data available. There's no conclusive data available to us. Therefore, this part is alien to the passage, beyond scope of discussion, not mentioned in the passage anywhere. Okay. Option B, migrants who came to the colonies as indentured servants were more successful at making a livelihood than were farmers and artisans. Again, who was more successful, which group of migrants was more successful is beyond the scope of discussion. Therefore, this part is also alien to the passage. Option C, migrants to colonial North America were more successful at acquiring their own land during the 18th century than during the 17th century. So again, is the author mentioning anywhere that land acquisition, migrants interested in buying land, were more successful in the 18th century than in the 17th century? Such a comparison between two timelines is again alien to the passage, not mentioned anywhere. Option D, as 18th century progressed, the character of migrants in demand by American employers changed. Okay, which means earlier the recruiters demanded a particular type of migrant. Later, as the 18th century progressed, they started demanding different type of migrants. Okay. Look at this sentence. By the 1730s, however, so there's a change. American employers demanded skilled artisans. Before that, thousands of unskilled laborers migrated. So the nature of the character of migrants, the type of migrants who were migrating to the North America changed by the 1730s, and 1730s means the 18th century. Therefore, option D is the correct answer. Now, sometimes we don't realize that 18th century is not 1800s. It is 1700s, 18th century. So we are living in 21st century or 22nd century. We are living in 21st century, right? So 2022 means 21st century. Similarly, when we say 18th century, we're actually referring to 1700s. Okay. Option D is the correct answer. Question 2, the author of the passage states that Balin failed to do what? Author mentions Balin's failure only in the fourth paragraph when he is describing his fourth proposition. And he failed to consider what? He says, let's read this sentence carefully. Balin argues that the colonies were a half-civilized hinterland, which means bad copy, bad replica of the European cultural system. Okay. The colonies in the United States were a bad copy of European cultural system. Balin argues. He is undoubtedly correct. Author of the passage says that he is undoubtedly correct. To insist that colonies were part of Anglo-American empire, this part is correct. But to divide the empire into English core and colonial periphery, as Balin does, devalues the achievements of colonial culture. It is true, as Balin claims, that high culture in the colonies never matched that in England. So there was a difference between the cultures. But what of 17th century New England, where the settlers created effective laws, blah, 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 which means New England was an example where the culture pretty much matched that in England. Okay. So according to the passage, Balin failed to do what? Option A, give sufficient emphasis to the cultural and political interdependence of the colonies and England. Was there a cultural interdependence between colonies and England? In fact, England was not dependent upon colonies at all for its cultural evolution or cultural development. So therefore, there was no interdependence as such, unilateral dependence, if at all. So this part is alien. England never depended on colonies. Colonies depended on England for their cultural development. Okay. Option B. Balin failed to describe carefully how migrants of different ethnic backgrounds preserved their culture in the United States. This part is totally out of scope. How they preserved their background, never mentioned in the passage. Okay. Balin failed to take advantage of social research on the experiences of colonists who migrated to colonial North America specifically to acquire land. Why specifically to acquire land? Has the author mentioned that he failed to take advantage of the social research? As a matter of fact, he's mentioned that he has recently reinterpreted, first line of the passage, he has recently reinterpreted by applying new social research findings. So he has actually used social research, the new social research. He has not failed to take advantage of it. So in a sense, it's contradictory to what the passage says. Option D, Balin failed to relate the experience of the migrants to the political values that eventually shaped the character of the United States. Last lines, please. So here, it is in the author concludes by saying, it is in the West that a peculiarly, uniquely American political culture began. Okay. Who, among colonists who were suspicious of authority and intensely anti-aristocratic. Okay. So Balin failed to acknowledge that there was a distinctive American culture developing in the West because of the political values that some colonists upheld. Okay. Option D should be the correct answer. He failed to relate the experience of the migrants to the political values. What are the political values? Independence. Whatever political values they had. It defined or it shaped the culture of United States. Okay. Also, this line explicitly mentions that Bernard Balin fails to link their experience with the political development of the United States. Clearly mentions. Option D is the correct answer. Question number 3. According to the passage, Balin and the author agree on which of the following statements about the culture of colonial New England. Okay, they agree. Balin and the author of this passage would agree on this part. Please note, author agrees with Balin when he says he's undoubtedly correct to insist that colonies were part of Anglo-American Empire. Similarly, he agrees with him when he says it is true. Author says it is true, as Balin claims, that high culture in the colonies never matched that in England. So the colonial culture was somehow somewhat inferior to the actual culture in England. It never really matched the culture in England. Author agrees with this part also. He says it is true as Balin claims. So they both agree on this part. Option A, high culture in New England never equaled the high culture of England. Direct answer. Option A should be the correct answer. Option B, they agree that both of them, Balin and the author, that cultural achievements of colonial New England have generally been unrecognized by historians. Alien idea, totally, entirely out of scope. We don't see anything like this mentioned anywhere in the passage. Option C, they both agree that the colonists imitated the high culture of England. Yes, this part they agree with. And did not develop a culture that was uniquely their own. Wait, this part author does not agree with. In fact, it is the conclusion here, last part. There was a distinctive or peculiar or unique American culture developing in the West. So this part is contrary to what passage says, the main idea itself. Option D, they both agree that the southern colonies were greatly influenced by the high culture of New England. It's the other way around. It's the converse. Converse is true. Author says the New England culture had powerful effects on North American culture. And here he says the southern colonies were greatly influenced by New England culture. It was not the southern colonies. It was the North American. It was the northern colonies which were, affected. So not converse exactly, but factually incorrect. So option D is also wrong. Question 4. The author of the passage would be most likely to agree with which of the following statements about Balin's work. Author would agree about Balin's work that Balin underestimates the effect of Puritan thought on North American culture. That is correct. The line that we just read, author mentions that Balin might respond that New England was exceptional. However, author says, however, it's a contrast sign, which means author is countering Balin now. And he's saying, however, the ideas and institutions developed by New England Puritans had powerful effects on North American culture. So New England was not just an exception. It had far-reaching effects or impact on North American culture. So would the author agree that Balin underestimates the effects of Puritan thought on North American culture? Yes, he does. Option A should be the correct answer. Balin overemphasizes the economic dependence of colonies on Great Britain, not mentioned anywhere. About the economic dependence on Great Britain. Or Balin overemphasizes this fact. Author never ever mentions this. Option C, Balin's description of the colonies as part of Anglo-American Empire is misleading and incorrect. To the contrary, author says he's undoubtedly correct to insist that they were part of Anglo-American Empire. So this part is also contradictory to what the passage says. Option D, Balin failed to test his propositions on a specific group of migrants. Author never mentions that he should have tested his propositions on a specific group of migrants. So again, alien to the passage. Correct answer, option A. To the last question. According to the passage, which of the following is true of English migrants to the colonies during the 18th century? Okay, let's see. Most of them were farmers. Never mentioned that a vast majority was farmers. Alien idea eliminated. Most of them came because they were unable to find work in England. We don't know whether they were able or unable. We can't assume that there was no work available in England. So they moved to this part of the world, which later came to be known as the United States. So this part is also alien, beyond the scope of discussion, beyond the scope of the passage. They differed from other English people in that they were willing to travel. In fact, it is mentioned that English people had a tendency to travel. So those who reached United States were no different from others. It was just a natural spillover. So they happened to land there. So they did not differ. Second paragraph, it was mentioned explicitly. So residents of early modern England moved regularly about their country. So it was their habit. So those who reached the United States were, just one step ahead. They were not very different from an average English. Okay. They expected the migrants who had migrated to, to New England in the 18th century. They expected that the colonies would offer them increased opportunity. It was mentioned explicitly, direct question. They migrated to America because they regarded it as the land of opportunity. So option D should be the correct answer. Hope you got all five of them right, guys. If not, I hope at least you understood the reasoning. Please make sure that you do not simply watch the video in 2x or 2.5x only to look at the answers, the correct answers. That does not help. It is the process that matters. Compare your reasoning for eliminating the wrong answer choices with that described in the video. That way you draw maximum benefit from this course. Keep learning, keep improving. Cheers to learning.